What happens when a deck requires 0 brain cells to play? When you can literally play it with your eyes closed and still climb trophies? Throughout Clash Royale's entire history, there have been decks so mindless that they made skilled players question their sanity. These are the decks that turned mid-ladders into a nightmare and made everyone break their phones. Today, we're diving deep into the most brain-dead, no-skill-required decks that have ever been meta in this game. I've ranked some of the most no-skill decks that dominated different eras of Clash Royale. By the end of this video, you'll understand which deck truly takes the crown as the most brain-dead broken strategy ever created. Drop your predictions in the comments right now, because some of these might surprise you. Starting off, we need to talk about the Lumberjack Balloon combo that absolutely destroyed ladder back in 2018, 2019, and yet you still face it today, with new variations like the one with Mega Knight or Freeze. This deck was the definition of brain-dead gameplay, because your entire strategy revolved around one simple concept. Drop Lumberjack, drop Balloon behind it, and watch towers disappear. The beauty of this combination was how forgiving it was for terrible players. Lumberjack would tank damage while moving toward the tower at incredible speeds. When he inevitably died, his rage spell would activate automatically, turning your balloon into a problem that moves faster than most players could react to. The timing didn't need to be perfect because Lumberjack's rage lasted long enough to cover any placement mistakes you made. What made this deck particularly frustrating was how it punished good defensive plays. Your opponent could perfectly counter your push with their Inferno Dragon or Electro Wizard, but if they made even the smallest positioning error, your balloon would still connect for massive damage. The deck ran cheap cycle cards like Bats, Ice Spirit, and Skeletons, which meant you could spam this combo repeatedly throughout the match. Most players using this strategy didn't need to understand elixir management, positioning. They just wait till they have their cards in rotations and sent them down the same lane over and over again. The community backlash was intense during this period. People climbed thousands of trophies just by playing this brain-dead deck, and everywhere was flooded with complaints. Players would play this deck that required no skill and win by mastering this one push, while skilled players using complex strategies struggled to gain ground. The worst part was facing this deck in tournaments where everyone was using maxed cards. Your opponent could make terrible defensive decisions all match long, but one successful balloon connection would deal over 1,500 damage to your tower. Eventually, both Lumberjack and Balloon received multiple nerfs that reduced their synergy, but for over a year, this combo dominated casual play. Moving up our list, we have the infamous Expo Tesla cycle deck that peaked during 2020 and early 2021. Now, some people might argue that Expo requires skill because of its defensive complexity, but here's the thing. The version that dominated ladder was played in the most brain-dead way possible. Players would drop Expo at the bridge, place Tesla in the middle, and then cycle defensive cards until their opponent ran out of counters. The skill ceiling was high, but the skill floor was incredibly low, because the deck could win games through pure repetition. The strategy was mind-numbingly simple in most matchups. You'd wait for your opponent to make the first move, defend with your cycle cards, then immediately punish with Expo Tesla. If your opponent didn't have a strong counter in hand, they'd lose their tower in under 30 seconds. The Tesla would handle most ground threats, while Expo locked onto the tower from a safe distance. Even when opponents brought hard counters like Rocket or Lightning, many Expo players would just go for draws by playing defensively for the entire match. What made this deck particularly toxic was how it warped the entire meta around it. Every deck needed to carry specific counters just to avoid losing instantly to Expo. Players who didn't adapt their decks would face opponents who dropped Expo at the bridge and won without making a single strategic decision. The deck's defensive capabilities were so strong that even terrible players could turtle up and force late games against superior opponents, where a single tower lock meant game over. Forums were filled with complaints about how Expo players would BM after winning games they clearly didn't deserve. The most frustrating aspect was playing against Expo users, who clearly had no idea how to use the deck properly, but still won through sheer card power. They'd make obvious mistakes, like placing Expo in bad positions or wasting cycle cards, but the deck was forgiving enough that these errors rarely mattered. As long as they could drop Expo and Tesla in roughly the right spots, they'd climb trophies, while actual skilled players struggled with more complex strategies. This brings us to our next entry, which could win your baby cousin games, which is a different level of nightmare. But first, since I hadn't asked in the beginning, might as well. Now, let me know in the comments which deck you think deserves the #1 spot. The next deck on our list will make the previous ones look like they required a PhD in rocket science. Taking the second place, we need to discuss the absolute cancer that was Golem Night Witch Clone. This deck emerged right after Clone got its major rework in late 2018. The strategy was so brain-dead that even players who had never touched a beatdown deck before could suddenly push to Ultimate Champ without breaking a sweat. It single-handedly made thousands of players quit the game temporarily. Here's how this monstrosity worked. You'd place Golem at the back during single elixir time, which gave you plenty of time to build up supporting troops behind it. Pre-nerf Night Witch would spawn her bats continuously while walking behind the Golem, creating this massive death ball that kept growing bigger and scarier. But the real nightmare began when you dropped Clone Spell on this entire push. Suddenly, you had 2 Golems, 2 Night Witches, and double the amount of bats swarming toward your opponent's tower. The beauty of this deck from a no-skill perspective was that timing didn't matter at all. You could clone too early, too late, or in completely wrong positions, and the sheer amount of troops on the field would still overwhelm most defenses. Even if your opponent had perfect counters like poison or arrows, they couldn't clear everything fast enough. The cloned units would deal their damage before dying, and the original units would continue pushing for the tower. What made experienced players lose their minds was watching terrible opponents win games they had no business winning. These players would make obvious mistakes like placing Golem in the wrong lane or wasting elixir on unnecessary cards. But none of that mattered because once the clone push got rolling, skill became irrelevant. Towers would melt in seconds while the Golem player just sat there watching their troops do all the work. The community outrage reached peak levels during this period. Content creators made entire videos begging Supercell to nerf this strategy. Tournament brackets were filled with Golem clone players who clearly didn't understand advanced gameplay, but kept advancing because their deck played itself. The worst part was that countering this deck required perfect timing and elixir management, while playing it required absolutely nothing except patience. Even after multiple nerfs to Clone, Night Witch, and Golem himself, this deck continued dominating mid-ladder for months. Players would adapt by adding different support cards, like Baby Dragon or Mega Minion, but the core strategy remained the same. Drop your tanks, build a push, clone everything, and watch your opponent suffer. The deck finally fell out of favor when Clone got reworked again, but its legacy as one of the most skill-free strategies ever created remains intact. Now we're approaching the truly heinous territory. Coming in at number 2 is a deck that made even Golem Clone look balanced and fair, which, in my opinion, was impossible. This strategy was so brain-dead that players would literally win games while multitasking and watching Netflix, or by sitting on their phone, literally butt-dialing a win. The Elite Barbarian Rage combo that terrorized ladder throughout multiple different eras of the game's history. Elite Barbarians were originally designed as a high-risk, high-reward card that required precise timing and positioning to be effective. Instead, they became the ultimate noob stomper when paired with Rage Spell. The strategy was embarrassingly simple. Wait for your opponent to overcommit Elixir on offense, then drop Elite Barbarians at the bridge with Rage Spell behind them. These overleveled monsters would sprint toward the tower faster than most players could react. So there you have it, the most brain-dead decks in Clash Royale history. From Balloon Lumberjack to Elite Barbarian spam, these strategies prove that sometimes the simplest approach wins games, while skilled players spent years mastering complex interactions and timing. That's the beauty and curse of Clash Royale. No matter how much the game evolves, there's always going to be that one deck that makes you question everything. Like, for example, yesterday, I went against a Boss Bandit and 3 Musketeers, cycle deck after the update at 12,000 trophies, which in my opinion should be out of mid-ladder range, especially since the trophies reset, but I guess 12,000 is the new mid-ladder, and it made me question my time spent on this game. They also had Evo Scaly Army and Evo Royal Ghost, which was nice, I guess, but enough from me. Drop a comment with your most hated no-skill deck, and smash that subscribe button for more Clash Royale content.